When you think of Mewtwo, you probably picture an impossibly powerful Pokémon, a villain who is genetically engineered to hate all of humanity. We see him as this force of nature, born from a cold lab and a thirst for power. But what if I told you that the rage-filled psychic from the movies wasn't born from a desire for strength, but from a deep, personal tragedy? What if the real key to understanding Mewtwo is in a story that was left out of the original movie's American release? A story some say was just too heartbreaking for audiences at the time. This is the story of a hidden prologue that changes everything we thought we knew. This is the story of Mewtwo, the cloned little girl whose death created a monster. To get a handle on the monster, you first have to understand the man who made him. And our story doesn't start in some high-tech lab, but in the heart of a grieving father. Dr. Fuji was one of the most brilliant scientists in the Pokémon world, a true master of genetics. But all his genius couldn't save him from tragedy. He lost his young daughter Amber in a horrible accident, and when she died, a part of him died too. His wife, who couldn't stand to watch his grief swallow him whole, eventually left. She begged him to accept that their daughter was gone forever. But Dr. Fuji just couldn't. He was a scientist, a man who solved problems, and he saw death as the ultimate problem to solve. He became obsessed, pouring everything he had into a single radical goal, to clone his daughter and bring Amber back to life. This wasn't about science anymore. It was a desperate, tragic attempt to rewind his own life and hear his daughter's laugh one more time. He was a broken man trying to glue the pieces of his life back together with the forbidden science of creating life. He wasn't just playing God. He was trying to strike a bargain with death itself, using a microscope and a test tube. Now, a project like this, one that pushes the boundaries of what's even possible, takes a staggering amount of money and resources, way more than one scientist could ever get on his own. And so, Dr. Fuji, lost in his desperation, made a deal. The only person willing to fund his radical, controversial research was Giovanni, the shadowy leader of Team Rocket. But Giovanni didn't care about helping a grieving father. He saw Fuji's genius as a way to get the ultimate weapon. Giovanni's money came with a very specific condition. Before Fuji could even think about perfecting the clone of his daughter, he first had to prove his science worked by cloning a Pokémon. And not just any Pokémon, he had to clone the mythical, legendary Mew, using a fossilized strand of its DNA to create what would hopefully be the most powerful Pokémon in the world. Dr. Fuji agreed. He probably told himself it was a necessary evil, a stepping stone. If he could successfully create a clone of Mew, he'd unlock the secrets he needed to finally bring his Amber back. It was a classic deal with the devil. In exchange for the chance to get his daughter back, he would hand a criminal syndicate a living weapon of mass destruction. The lab on New Island suddenly served two purposes. For Fuji, it was a cradle of hope. For Giovanni, it was an armory. And right in the middle of it all was the developing psychic mind of the creature that would become Mewtwo. Inside the cold, sterile lab, floating in humming containment tubes, something completely unexpected started to happen. As the clones grew, Mewtwo and a clone of Amber that Fuji called Ambertwo, and even clones of each starter Pokémon, their minds started to reach out. In the quiet, shared darkness of their own minds, they found each other. Mewtwo, whose consciousness was brand new, was confused. "Where am I? What am I?" he asked without speaking. And it was Amber, too, who answered him. She seemed to have her original memories, and she became Mewtwo's guide, his first and only friend. Through their telepathic link, she showed him a world he couldn't see. She shared her memories with him, a place she called her Remember Place, full of sunlight, wind, and rain. She taught him about being alive, about what it meant to be a person, about feelings. When Mewtwo asked her if the moon was the sun, she gently explained that the moon was there so people wouldn't be afraid of the dark. In this shared dream, Mewtwo was learning what it meant to be alive. Not from the cold scientist watching his brainwaves, but from the warm, kind mind of a little girl. He wasn't just a specimen anymore. He was a friend. Amber, too, told him it didn't matter if he was a Pokémon or a human. All that mattered was being alive. For just a little while, Dr. Fuji's desperate project had accidentally created something beautiful, a pure friendship that existed only in their minds, a small glimmer of hope in a project born from such darkness. But that fragile piece was never meant to last. The science that had created them was still unstable, imperfect. The very process that gave them life couldn't keep them alive for long. One by one, the clones of the starter Pokémon started to flicker out of their shared consciousness, their life signals flatlining on Dr. Fuji's monitors. To the scientists, it was just another failed experiment. Mewtwo was terrified. He could feel his friends just disappearing, and then the worst thing imaginable started to happen. Ambertwo, his guide, his only friend, began to fade away too. Her image in their remember place grew faint, almost transparent. Mewtwo begged her, asking what was happening. With a deep sadness but also a strange sense of peace, she told him, "I think it's time to say goodbye." For the very first time, Mewtwo began to cry, his powerful mind projecting waves of pure sorrow and loss. He didn't understand what death was, only that the one person who gave his life any meaning was being taken from him. In her last moments, Ambertwo gave him one final gift, words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Don't cry, Mewtwo," she said. "You have to live. Life is wonderful." And then she was gone. The light in her tube went dark, the psychic connection was cut, and Mewtwo was left completely alone in the silent darkness, with nothing but the echo of her last words and a powerful, terrifying new feeling: grief. The glimmer of hope was gone, setting the stage for the monster's birth. Ambertwo's death was the spark that lit the fuse. All alone in his own mind, drowning in a sadness he couldn't understand, Mewtwo's psychic power exploded. It was a raw, uncontrolled scream of pure agony that sent the lab's equipment into a frenzy. The scientists, including a panicked Dr. Fuji, didn't see a grieving child. They saw a dangerously unstable experiment. They saw power, not pain. Fearing they would lose control of Giovanni's new weapon, they made a cold, clinical, and terrible decision. They didn't try to comfort the grieving creature. They decided to control it. They sedated the young Mewtwo to suppress his overwhelming emotions. This act was a deliberate choice to try and manage their creation, but it had a catastrophic side effect. It would ultimately wipe his memories clean. This was maybe more violent than any physical attack. They didn't just sedate him, they stole his entire past. They erased Ambertwo. They erased her memories of the sun, her kind voice, and her final beautiful words. They took away the only friendship and love Mewtwo had ever known, and all that was left behind was an empty space filled with confusion, trauma, and a deep, simmering anger. When Mewtwo finally woke up, fully grown and more powerful than they could have imagined, he had no memory of Ambertwo. All he had were questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And a bone-deep feeling of rage toward the humans who created him, the ones who answered his questions with talk of experiments and power. They hadn't just made a powerful Pokémon. By erasing his ability to love and leaving only the scar of its loss, they had forged his grief into a weapon. The monster wasn't born in that test tube. He was created the moment they decided to erase the one thing that made him more than a weapon: his heart. The story of Ambertwo adds such a tragic and complex layer to one of Pokémon's most famous characters. It's a wild reminder that there are often hidden depths to the stories we think we know so well. If you think these kinds of deep dives into lore are as fascinating as I do, you should consider subscribing and ringing that notification bell. I have to ask, how does this lost story change the way you see Mewtwo? Let me know what you think down in the comments. In the end, the story of Ambertwo is just a profound tragedy, filled with a bitter, painful irony. Dr. Fuji, a man so completely consumed by his own grief, tried to conquer death. He refused to let go of his daughter, and in his obsessive quest, he was forced to lose her all over again, watching her clone fade away into nothing. But the real kicker, the ultimate irony, is what he created in her place. In trying to escape his own pain, he inflicted that exact same pain onto a new, living being. He created Mewtwo, a creature whose entire existence would be defined by loss. A grief so powerful it could level mountains. Mewtwo's rage, his hatred for humanity, his entire crisis about who and what he is, it all comes from the stolen memory of a friend, the ghost of a love he can feel, but can never, ever remember. Dr. Fuji's experiment was a total disaster. Not because the cloning was unstable, but because he failed to understand the one thing he was trying to bring back, a soul. He saw science where he should have seen a heart, and so the father who couldn't handle losing his daughter created a child defined by that very loss, unleashing a powerful, vengeful, and heartbroken monster onto the world. It leaves you with a haunting question: what is a life without the memories we make and the love we share? And what happens to a soul when those are the very first things that are taken away?